Hi, my name is Alexandra Nunez, and I will be going over the feedback loops in non-gravid female reproductive systems. Non-gravid female reproductive systems means a not pregnant female reproductive system. So I'm going to first go over the female reproductive anatomy. So the main parts here that I'm going to go over, which are shown in this image here, are the ovaries that connect to the fallopian tubes that go to the uterus, the cervical canal, cervix, and then vagina. Specifically, mostly focusing on the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and uterus, as that is where most of the hormones for the female reproductive cycle are produced and go through, especially the egg for possible pregnancy, but doesn't occur in this non-gravid female reproductive system. All right. And then the menstrual cycle. So females produce gametes in a monthly cycle, averaging 28 days. The normal range is between 24 to 35 days. The menstrual cycle is basically menstruation, which lasts between 3 to 7 days of a bloody uterine discharge, coined also a period. The ovarian cycle is a monthly cycle of egg development. It is in 3 phases: the follicular phase, ovulation, and luteal phase. I'm going to go over those in more detail in the next slides. Then there is the uterine cycle, which is the endometrial lining of the uterus, because that also goes through a cycle in accordance with the ovarian cycle. The 3 phases are menses, which is menstrual bleeding from the uterus, proliferate phase in anticipation of pregnancy. The endometrium adds a new layer of cells. The secretory phase, which hormones from the corpus luteum convert the thickened endometrium into a secretory structure. Those basically happen more in the luteal phase, but also going into the follicular phase. And then these are the hormones of the menstrual cycle. I'm going to go over more in detail. This is just a brief overview about it. Some important things to note about it that you can see in this image is how the positive and negative feedback loops go. You can see it based on the negative in most of these cycles, but also there is a positive cycle that occurs. Also, the ovary and uterine cycles are under primary control of various hormones, the GnRH from the hypothalamus and the FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. Also, estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin, and AMH from the ovaries. During the follicular phase of the cycle, estrogen is the dominant steroid hormone. Ovulation is triggered by surges in LH and FSH. In the luteal phase, progesterone is dominant, although estrogen is still present, which is the main things to focus on. I'll go into more detail now with the follicular phase, which is separated into early follicular phase and mid to late follicular phase, as they are slightly different. So menstruation starts this follicular phase cycle. So under the influence of FSH, a tertiary group of follicles in the ovaries begin to mature. So this is the main focus of this phase. As the follicles grow, their granulosa cells under the influence of FSH and their thecal cells under the influence of LH, they start to produce steroid hormones. Granulosa cells also begin to secrete AMH, which decreases the follicular sensitivity to FSH. This prevents the recruitment of additional follicles once one group starts to develop. Thecal cells synthesize androgens that diffuse into neighboring granulosa cells, where aromatase converts them into estrogen. And then estrogen exerts negative feedback on the pituitary FSH and LH, which are secreted from GnRH from the hypothalamus. Estrogen stimulates the addition of estrogen production. This positive feedback allows follicles to continue to produce estrogen, even though FSH and LH levels decrease. In the uterus, menstruation ends in this early follicular phase. This period is characterized by an increase in cell numbers by enhanced blood supply to bring nutrients and oxygen to the thickened endometrium. Estrogen also causes mucus glands of the cervix to produce clear and watery mucus. That's in the early follicular phase. Then the mid to late follicular phase. As the follicular phase starts to end, ovarian estrogen secretion peaks. There's only one follicle still developing. The granulosa cell of this dominant follicle begin to secrete inhibin and progesterone in addition to estrogen. Estrogen changes to positive feedback, leading to pre-ovulatory GnRH surges. This is enhanced by rising levels of progesterone. The results in LH surge and, to a lesser degree, FSH surge. LH surge is an essential part of ovulation because it triggers the secretion of numerous chemical signals necessary for the final steps of oocyte maturation, where meiosis resumes in the developing follicle with the first meiotic division. High levels of estrogen in this late follicular phase prepare the uterus for possible pregnancy. The endometrium grows into a thickness of about 3 to 4 millimeters. The cervical glands produce lots of thin and stringy mucus to facilitate sperm entry. A lot of this is in preparation for a pregnancy that could possibly occur. All right, and then ovulation. This occurs about 16 to 24 hours after LH peaks. The mature follicles secrete prostaglandins and prolactic enzymes such as the matrix metalloproteinase or the MMPs. They dissolve collagen and other components of connective tissue, holding the follicular cell walls together, which causes the follicular cell walls to rupture. This antrofluid, along with the egg, moves the egg to the fallopian tubes to either be fertilized or to die. And then after that, it goes to the luteal phase. So it's also separated into early to mid luteal phase and late luteal phase to the start of menstruation. So in early to mid luteal phase, after ovulation, follicular cells migrate to the antral space. They start mingling with former granulosa cells and transforming into luteal cells of the corpus luteum. This is a process called luteinization. Luteal cells accumulate lipid droplets and glycogen granules in their cytoplasm and begin to secrete hormones such as progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin. So progesterone is the dominant hormone of the luteal phase. The combination of estrogen and progesterone exerts a negative feedback on the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. So under the influence of progesterone, the endometrium continues its preparation for pregnancy and becomes a secretory structure. Endometrial glands coil and additional blood vessels grow to the connective tissue layer. They deposit lipids and glycogen in their cytoplasm. They provide nutrients for its developing embryo while the placenta is developing, which would happen if the female was pregnant. Progesterone also causes cervical mucus to thicken, and that creates a plug preventing bacteria and sperm from entering the uterus. This is also in accordance if a female was pregnant. So progesterone also has a thermoenergetic ability during the luteal phase, as a woman's basal temperature can go up 0.3 to 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and it remains elevated until menstruation. All right, and then the late luteal phase onto menstruation. If pregnancy does not occur after about 12 days, the corpus luteum spontaneously undergoes apoptosis, which is where the luteal cells degrades, progesterone and estrogen productions decrease. This fall removes the negative feedback signals to the pituitary hypothalamus, so secretion of FSH and LH increases, and the corpus luteum becomes the corpus albicans, which is like the inactive version of it. When the corpus luteum disintegrates and the hormone production decreases, blood vessels to the surface layers of the endometrium contract, and without this oxygen and nutrients, the surface cells die, which is like what starts the period. So after about 2 days, the endometrium begins to slough off its surface layer and menstruation begins. Menstruation continues about 3 to 7 days, and it goes into the follicular phase of the next ovarian cycle. So it just keeps repeating every month. Again, the cycle lasts about 28 days or a month. Could be different for everybody. But this is the ovarian cycle and feedbacks of a biological female and what happens in their body when they're not pregnant. Of course, there's a lot more. If a female were to get pregnant, it would change the hormones in the cycle, more positive feedback, trying to get all those hormones pushed out to create the embryo and fetus. That's all I have. Hopefully this was informative.